Okay, so here's an update on this play to marks widget that I pushed into the DMX tools. Like the idea just being how to deal with controlling playback on a sequence or timeline. So to use this, I'm actually using this media layer test and playback test, this LS playback 1 and as level sequence. And so what I wanted to do was just get a way that I could control where I was playing back to based on these marks. Right now, the current method for doing something like this is to adjust the end frame and the start time as well. So I wanted to be able to do this in this method. So what I'm actually using is two widgets. So one widget is actually contains the logic for each individual button, and then the other widget is like the overall container for both of those. So we'll look at them kind of separately. So basically what I'm doing is first, you definitely want to check to make sure you have a valid level sequence. If you don't check for this, it used to crash. I think this has been fixed, but it's not a bad idea to always kind of check for these kinds of things. And then I'm going to get all the marked frames. And then for each button click, I want to get the time that the playback head is at currently. So that way, you know, if I'm like here, it's just going to play from like that spot. And then I want to, we kind of need to deal with this idea of tick resolution versus display rate, because frames and display rates can change, and so I want to make sure that I'm doing this appropriately based on what I'm doing. So I'm gonna get the tick resolution, get the display rate, and kind of break these into numerator, denominator, do some maths here, and make sure that I'm working with the right stuff. And then all I'm gonna do is get the mark frame, get the index number that is kind of matches with it, and break that and get a frame number, because all we're doing is playing to a frame number essentially. And so once we have that, then we set that based on, because like typically it's going to deal with like the actual number of like ticks that so you're gonna, when you get this value here, it's actually going to say like 12,000 or something like that, which correlates to what you have set inside here. So depending on what your tick interval is, you will get different numbers, right? And this is kind of important to note. So, but this should take care of all this in the back end, but it's just, this is what all this is doing. So then it just sets the end and tells it to play. So inside the actual plate of marks, what it's actually doing, same thing, we're getting the level sequence, we're getting the display rate, tick res, all this stuff. And then we're just kind of going through each widget. We're creating a mark box. So we're actually creating one of these widgets, which just is like this box, for each one of the marks that we have. And it's just adding it to this box and putting some text on it. And the big thing that it's doing though is it's getting this mark index. So for each marked frame, it increments the index. And so each one of them has a different index, and that's what we're using inside here to determine which one to play to, right? So the index has to match what we're thinking. There's one current problem with this setup, and that is right now when you get the marked frames, it's not necessarily sorted in an order that matters. They're kind of in the order that they're created, not necessarily in the order of chronologics. This has been addressed in a future version, but just you'll see what I'm talking about here. So right now, if I put my playhead back to the beginning and I hit A, it's going to set the end time and play directly to that. Same thing if I go to B, same kind of thing. But you'll notice C is down here at the end, and that's because I kind of did some deleting and moving, and it would not reshuffle the order since it's based on where they're created. The good news about this is like I can drag them around and update it. So if I move this, and update, or if I add new ones or whatever, actually, it doesn't even matter if I update, but it's going to still obey it. Maybe I do have to update. Let's see here. Yeah, I guess I do, because it's getting it before you actually hit the button to make it a little more efficient. So, but it does do what I'm hoping. And right now, the only thing is if obviously the playhead is before where it should be, like so if I hit B, it's just going to start at the beginning and play there, which kind of is what I would expect. But this is the current kind of methodology for this right now. There's not, in future versions, there will be a much neater way to deal with this. There's actually going to be a new node that's called play to, and you'll be able to play to a mark or a number or a frame. But this is just kind of the idea and the logic that I was using to execute something like this currently.